Ghana's local bond investors continue to push back after the government published a bond swap offer in December 2022. Negotiations eventually led to an agreement to exempt pension funds from the swap and the eventual publication on Christmas Day of a revised debt swap offer with the new exit bonds. In a statement from the Individual Bondholders Forum, IBF, it said that this arrangement irreversibly takes away the wealth and livelihoods of direct and indirect individual bondholders whose only crime has been to trust their government. The IBF is a group set up to protect the interests of individual investors in the respect of the domestic debt exchange program. And the group believes that government has shown total disregard for the contractual rights of individual bondholders and has made no effort to structure reasonable consultations. The IBF group comes after Ghana suspended interest payments on $13 billion of euro bonds, and its external creditors also formed a group. Joining me now from Accra, Ghana is Senyo Jose. He's one of the conveners of the Individual Bondholders Forum and also executive chairman of Cleave and Trove. He's also a finance and economic policy analyst. Senyo, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure mine too.
So let's start with the terms of the effects that your group thinks this debt swap issue or this debt swap program is going to cause. How many individual investors are likely to be affected by the government's domestic debt exchange program? In terms of the impact, what do you think the impact would be for those investors?
I think it's going to be quite catastrophic. You're looking at about 1.3 million investors involved. And we are just not looking at some very big set of boys looking at huge funds, and this may just be some drop in the ocean. No, we are looking at everyday people who just retail staff and even don't really have a pension. So what they do is actually invest in funds that bonds invest in our bond market. Some of them invest directly on our bond market. People who have been trying to build a savings, hopefully to be able to buy cars, to get to marry, to really make money of their lives, to buy property, to meet their aspiration, to fund education. A lot of people have actually built their wealth over time and actually ride on these investments to actually fund their school's education. You have pensioners involved. These pensioners depend on this to fund their education because our social security system is nothing to write home about. You could work all your years and your pension can hardly actually even pay for your utilities. So people invest extra income, and having done that and trusting government, they have actually exposed themselves to this assurance that government debts are risk-free, only to realize that it has now become the riskiest on the market. But I really want to believe that government will rise up to the occasion and take the responsible decision to protect the livelihoods of these people. And you're not just looking at them, you're also looking at their dependents. And possibly, together, you are looking at totally about 6.5 million people, which will be over 20% of Ghana's population. That's really going to be negatively impacted by this.
And that's a large number. So let's talk about it. When you mentioned governments, we've heard from President Nana Akufo-Addo as well as the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta initially that there would be no haircuts, there would be no loss for investors. And as we come to this date today, January 16, 2023, it looks like a promise that governments can no longer uphold. How much do you think local investors actually stand to lose?
One, I do not agree that government cannot uphold it. I mean, the president gave his word. He should be able to deliver on the word. You look at the budget. Ghana's budget does not look like a budget that has a country that feels it is broke. We have increased our expenditure by 40%. We have almost doubled our provision, our budget for our capital expenditure. All right, so if you actually take that increment and you just actually take 20% of the capital budget expenditure, you can actually service your debt for the year. Now you're looking at the investments. If this is to stand, at best, the value of people's investment now gets halved. At worst, and more functionally, looking at current inflation rates, people's investments will now reduce to 12% of the original value. So what kind of joke are we really toying around with when we are dealing with lives? That's why I keep telling people, this is not statistics. It is not just crunching numbers on your Excel spreadsheet. These are lives that you're actually toying with. And unfortunately, unlike other sectors in the investor space, where you actually have the banks who could actually benefit from financial stability funds as proposed by the government, or some of the forbearances that the central bank wants to grant it. Individual bondholders, both direct and indirect, don't have any kind of fallback. It hits you right in your face and immediate. That is catastrophic. It's going to destroy the livelihoods, the sustenance of people across the divide, from young families all the way to pensioners. I mean, you get calls and people have saved just to go back to school, only to be told this story that you can't even get a piece of your coupon the whole of this year. All right, you can't get your investment back till 15 years. Do they defer their education for another 15 years? I mean, it's very heartless and very unnecessary. The other key part of this entire conversation is this. The Ministry of Finance has been clear. It says that it needs 80% of eligible bonds to participate. Individual bondholders, both direct and indirect, from people that are middle class to people who are extremely low class, trying to make sense of life, account for 11%. So you actually have a whole span of close to 90% from which you get your 80%. So why do you really want to burden this class of people? Very insensitive, very impractical, and it does not make policy sense. And I want to believe His Excellency the President Nana Akufo-Addo will be rising up to the occasion and making the responsible decision. And that decision must be done quickly. You gave your word, Mr. President. You must honor your word. And more importantly, this is totally unnecessary. 11% out of the whole pie of 100%, from which you actually need 80%. Why don't you just deal with the others, where there are no safety nets, where there are safety nets, and you don't want to really disrupt the lives of 6.5 million livelihoods without any safety nets? I just don't think that's something that can stand.
So let's look at, because today is actually a very interesting day in this conversation. So after the announcement of the domestic debt exchange program, that deadline of December 30th, 2022 was extended to today, Monday, January 16, 2023. Government has said it's a mandatory deadline, which means holders either have to accept government's offer or they risk serious losses. What do you think we'll find? It's a lie. Okay, what do you think we'll find at the end of today?
I tell people all that's happening is these are politicians trying to sell fear, uncertainty, and doubt. FAD has no place in Ghana. We are the black star of Africa. We secured sub-Saharan Africa's first independence. Our national intel tells us to resist oppressors' rule. It tells us to be bold and to defend the freedom and rights of our people, and that will be defended. These are the legal facts. The current bond as offered has very weak legal provisions. Under your current structure, we are dealing with 4 bonds. The ESLA bond, Energy Sector Levies bond. You also have something called the Dachi bond. All these two are tied to taxes that have been irrevocably assigned to SPVs that issued the papers. These sources of revenue or these taxes and their flows are not impaired in any form. They take the other two sets, which is the government of Ghana city bond, the government of Ghana dollar bond. Currently, bondholders have every single right to sue government in the event of a default and attach any asset of government. And there are lots of assets of government. But the new proposal is trying to now ask you to surrender that right, meaning government can breach the terms of this new arrangement for the next year, for the next 2 years. You can sue government and you can't attach a single asset, meaning your judgment will not be executable. Who does this? Who does this? What is the wisdom in surrendering something of value, legally and economically, for something that is potentially rather worthless? So it is not the case. Nobody should really get carried away by anything here. Government has no capacity, has no legal grounding not to honor the obligations under the current bond structures for individual holders.
Okay.
In the case of banks, they are different because the central bank and the risk rating they put on various assets on their balance sheet can actually compel them to get into this particular structure. Individual bonds holders, we don't have any regulator, we don't carry any special balance sheet except for balance sheet that we have to share with our wives and children or our husbands and then our children. Forget it. It is not the case. What we hold now is better. It is legally more secure. And government has asked the whole populace to pay more taxes, and nobody has rebelled. We have accepted the liability. We have asked us to now get into our savings, and that we say no. If our taxes have been misused, have not been optimized, I apologize. Go back and apologize to the people. Go back and look at the expenditure of government. Revise your expenditure. Don't be increasing your expenditure to 40% when you don't have money. Can you imagine somebody who owes you and tells you he's broke, but is actually releasing a Lamborghini and a Bugatti and a red Ferrari for his son to go for his football games? Does that make sense to you?
I believe that's a rhetorical question, but I'm very sure.
To ride your Ferrari, and at the same time, and then somebody is like just a trader, a simple trader, a petty trader at Degule or possibly Mushi or Oshodi should be the one who should be funding that life. Think about it.
Okay, so
you should be sensitive to the lives of people. You want to live large and you do not want to sacrifice. And what is it that we have been asking you to sacrifice? Maintain your expenditure. When you maintain your expenditure, you have a huge budget space, fiscal space
to play with
under your obligations.
Okay, so Senor, I have to ask this last question, which expands it beyond the IBF. And the IBF right now stands about over 50,000 members who have signed on for you guys.
Our system just crashed because I think we just went past the 100,000 mark.
Oh, over 100,000 members who have now signed on for the IBF to represent them. But this all comes about because of the debt that Ghana has. Ghana has approached the IMF. Ghana is also now in talks with the G20 for the Common Framework Initiative, also in terms of this debt. So I would have to ask you then, in terms of the handling of the debt overall, how do you think government has really done? Because people that you're representing are in this situation because of decisions. Go ahead, please.
Look, how did we get here, Tolu? You borrow so much, and then you look at how you deploy your debt. You've taken 2/3 of your money to fund economic consumption, to keep a large size of government, to increase state-owned enterprises from 86 to 177. All you have to do is to cut down the size of government. Look at government's compensation and the pressure on it. There's so much room. And respectfully, look at the economic philosophy of this party. And bear in mind, I've been public. I voted for this particular government for it to come into office in 2016. It is supposed to be a center-right government. Which center-right government runs a very bloated government? I haven't seen some before. And this is at variance with the philosophy of the same government or the same particular political party. So Nana Akufo-Addo should really take inspiration from what he's supposed to stand for and take the right decisions. Why should everybody else suffer for just politicians really enjoy? I don't think that works. Being in politics is a call to service. Look at the entire debt profile and the entire engagement that you are having. Where do individual bondholders and this 6.5 billion liability, where do they fit in this mix? They have been at the wrong end of the bargain every time. You run down the energy sector, you ask us to pay more taxes. You run down the education sector, you say pay more taxes. You keep running things down, and it's not just this government, successive government. I think that now enough is enough. If you've run down our taxes, stop putting your hand into our savings. But for starters, we have asked the government to please take the right decision, and we are quoting Exodus 5:1. Please let our people go. Take them out of this structure, and let us have a viable and sustainable economy. Bear in mind, it is taking Ghana a long period for us to restore confidence and the culture of savings. These interventions have very long-term effect on the psyche of the Ghanaian and saving. And which economy would really grow with a weak saving culture? I'm here to see any. None. So we need to be careful what we are actually asking for. And I think that this government has the capacity to rethink what it is doing and should be able to build the will to make the right call. Because more importantly, it's not that material in the scheme of things.
This is going to be a very long sort of series of conversations. And Senor, I hope that you will respond to our call when we reach out again, because we're very interested in seeing how things develop with Ghana in this debt restructuring conversation.
We are family, Ghana and Nigeria, together along, man.
All right. Senor, thank you so much. We'll talk again soon. So.